Imagine, if you will, a massive creature, a whale, ending its life's journey not on some sandy beach, but sinking into the vast, silent, crushing depths of the ocean. Most of us might just see this as, a quiet departure, an end. But down in the deep sea, this event is anything but quiet. It's actually a spectacular new beginning, a literal explosion of life in the most unexpected place.
It's truly astonishing when you think about it. What looks like a solitary demise becomes the foundation of an entirely new, really complex ecosystem, and it's thriving in an environment that's otherwise defined by, frankly, extreme scarcity.
So today, we're embarking on a deep dive into some of the ocean's most fascinating and, let's be honest, often unseen phenomena. Our journey starts with these extraordinary whale falls.
Yeah.
Which are, the name kind of gives it away, literal oases of life on the deep sea floor.
Exactly. Oasis is a great word for it.
From there, we'll explore the unique creatures that call these sites home. We'll uncover how scientists, both historically and today, have managed to unveil such profound mysteries. And finally, we'll try to connect these deep-sea insights to the broader challenges and triumphs of ocean exploration, conservation, and global cooperation.
Right. It's a really unfolding story of discovery, the evolution of science itself, and just how intricately interconnected our blue planet's largest habitat really is.
Our mission here is to take this stack of diverse sources. We've got everything from precise biological descriptions of, like, deep-sea worms.
Oh, yeah, the famous ones.
To historical accounts of scientific expeditions and modern environmental assessments, and transform them into a cohesive, hopefully engaging narrative.
We really want to offer you a shortcut, kind of, to understanding these complex, truly awe-inspiring aspects of our blue planet, helping you grasp not just what we've discovered, but importantly, why it matters, and maybe share some surprising facts that keep us, hooked on this stuff.
We'll unpack the unknowns, dive into the data, and hopefully maybe ignite a desire in you to explore these solutions further. So, get ready for some serious aha moments, because the deep ocean is just full of surprises, and honestly, we're only just scratching the surface. 1. Introduction to whale falls. Deep sea feast and foundation. 1.1. Definition and formation of a whale fall. So let's unpack this a bit then. When we talk about a whale fall, what exactly are we picturing? It sounds pretty dramatic.
It really is a dramatic event, yeah, and a profoundly significant one for deep-sea ecology. A whale fall is precisely what it sounds like. It's the carcass of a large marine mammal, usually a whale, obviously, that sinks from the surface waters all the way down, sometimes thousands of meters, to the deep-sea floor.
Okay.
But this isn't just, a dead whale settling on the mud. It's a highly concentrated, massive input of organic carbon and nutrients. And it's landing in an environment that is typically incredibly food scarce. We're talking vast, cold, dark waters down there.
Right.
Generally, oligotrophic is the scientific term.
Oligotrophic, meaning?
Meaning very poor in essential nutrients. So normally, it supports very little life on its own. It's like a desert, biologically speaking.
So it's like dropping a colossal, nutrient-rich bomb into what is otherwise a biological desert. That comparison seems pretty spot on.
That's a very apt image, yeah. Imagine a sudden, enormous feast, or maybe think of it as a giant, nutrient-dense bonanza just dropped into this incredibly barren landscape.
Okay.
And this single event, this one whale fall, can actually sustain an entire unique ecosystem, a whole vibrant community of organisms for an astonishing period.
How long are we talking?
We're talking decades, potentially even over a century.
Wow, a century. From one whale.
Yes.
Yeah.
That longevity is quite remarkable, especially when you consider the surrounding deep sea environment where, every tiny speck of food is a constant struggle for survival. The sheer biomass delivered by just one whale fall is, it's astronomical compared to the typical, almost imperceptible trickle of organic matter marine snow that slowly drifts down from the sunlit surface waters above.
So it just completely changes the game locally.
It completely reorganizes the local ecosystem around it, yes.
Yeah.
For a very long time.
1.2. Significance as a concentrated nutrient input in oligotrophic deep-sea environments.
Okay, that brings us to a really interesting question then. Why is this sudden bonanza, as you called it, so incredibly significant for life in the deep? Why isn't it just quickly consumed and, gone in a few months?
Well, the deep ocean, as we've said, is often described as this calm, stable environment, but it's profoundly food limited. That's the key.
Yeah.
Life there has evolved over millennia to be highly efficient, accustomed to surviving on very, very little.
Right, scraping by.
Exactly.
Yep.
So therefore, a whale fall represents this exceptional and importantly rare nutrient pulse. Its immense significance lies not just in the sheer quantity of food, though that's huge, but in its ability to create a highly localized, long-term, and substantial food source.
Oh, the long-term aspect is critical. It's absolutely critical. This continuous supply lasting decades fuels a complex and dynamic community of organisms. And it stands in such stark contrast to the surrounding deep-sea floor where, as we sang, food acquisition is a constant, almost desperate struggle.
So it's not just about providing food for existing creatures, but it sounds like it's actually shaping the very nature of life down there, maybe even driving evolution.
Exactly. That's a really important point. This isn't merely about feeding the creatures that are already there. It's about shaping evolution and biodiversity in ways we are still just beginning to truly understand. The prolonged availability of such a concentrated energy source allows for the development of highly specialized adaptation.
Like the bone-eating worms we'll get to.
Precisely, and the emergence of unique species that couldn't possibly exist in the surrounding oligotrophic waters. So yeah, it's a powerful force for localized evolution, creating these pockets of intense biological activity and diversity within the vast, otherwise pretty desolate deep-sea landscape.
2. Ecological succession at whale falls. Stages of life and decay. 2.1. Overview of successional stages.
And what's truly fascinating here is that a whale fall isn't, a static environment once it settles on the seafloor. It doesn't just sit there. It undergoes this predictable ecological transformation, almost like a miniature planet with its own distinct life cycle.
Huh. A life cycle for a dead whale ecosystem.
Kind of, yeah. Scientists have meticulously studied these transformations over the years using ROVs and sometimes even submersibles, and they've identified these distinct stages, each dominated by different groups of organisms, all perfectly adapted to consume the carcass and its various byproducts over time.
So like different acts in a play, each with its own cast of characters coming on stage.
That's a perfect analogy, actually. This ecological succession, as it's called, is a beautiful and compelling illustration of how life adapts to exploit unique and, well, ephemeral resources that won't last forever. It demonstrates this chronological event that unfolds over many years, sometimes, as we said, even centuries, from the moment the whale hits the seabed and the first big scavengers arrive, right through until only the most resilient bone remains. And even that might sustain life for an astonishingly long time.
2.2, the mobile scavenger stage. Okay, so Act 1. Who are the first guests at this deep-sea banquet? Who gets the first bite of this colossal meal?
Right, the initial stage. This is dominated by large, highly mobile scavengers. These are creatures that possess this incredible ability to quickly detect the fresh fall, often we think from great distances, using chemical cues in the water.
How far are we talking?
It's hard to say exactly, but potentially kilometers, and then they rapidly converge and consume the soft tissues of the carcass. We're talking about animals like hagfish.
Ah, the slime eels.
Hey, yeah, those famously slimy, eel-like bottom dwellers. Also grenadiers, which are also known as rat tails. They're very common deep-sea fish with big heads and tapering bodies. And various species of sleeper sharks, which are large, sluggish sharks adapted to the deep.
Okay.
These animals are incredibly efficient, often stripping most of the muscle and the blubber from the whale within a surprisingly short period.
How short?
It can range from just a few months up to maybe a year or so. It depends on the size of the whale, the depth, temperature, and importantly, the local density of these scavengers.
So they're the cleanup crew, but on an absolutely epic scale, right? Like a deep-sea buffet that suddenly appears out of nowhere.
Exactly. You can think of them as the rapid response team. They make the most of this sudden, massive windfall of calories. These animals have evolved these remarkable senses, like highly sensitive olfactory organs, essentially super noses, to locate food in the perpetual darkness of the deep. And they have powerful jaws or specialized rasping tongues like the hagfish to efficiently devour the rich fatty tissues.
So their arrival really kicks things off.
It marks the very beginning of the whale fall's ecological journey, yes, the first major transformation.
2.3, the enrichment opportunist stage. All right, so once the big scavengers, the sharks and hagfish and rat tails, have had their fill, and the easy pickings, the blubber and muscle are mostly gone, what happens next? What kind of life moves in? Does the party just end, or does it sort of shift to smaller guests?
Oh, not at all. The party definitely shifts rather than ends. It transforms into something equally fascinating, just on a smaller scale initially. As those main soft tissues deplete and are consumed, the surrounding sediments, the mud on the seafloor right around the carcass, become heavily enriched.
Enriched how?
By diffusing organic matter, tiny bits breaking off, fluids leaching out, and also the remaining smaller bits of flesh still attached to the bones or mixed into the mud. This creates this highly fertile, chemically altered patch of ground. And that becomes perfect for what scientists call enrichment opportunists.
Opportunists. So they're taking advantage of the leftovers.
Pretty much, yeah. It's a diverse array of smaller invertebrates. This includes various types of polychaete worms, those segmented marine worms. You often see them on the beach. Specific types like ceracolids, dorvilids, chrysopetalids, genera like Ophryotrocha and Victorniella are often mentioned.
Okay, lots of worms.
Lots of worms, yeah. And also small shrimp-like crustaceans called amphipods. Different families become prominent, like Calliopidae, Podoceridae, Cebidae. They quickly colonize the area, making the most of these lingering nutrients in the sediment and on the bones.
So these are the smaller but still highly adaptable creatures that can really thrive on the residual nutrients.
Precisely. And what's particularly interesting about many of these opportunistic species, and this connects back to broader deep-sea ecology, is that they aren't exclusively found only at whale falls.
Wow.
They are also commonly reported from other what we call reducing habitats. These are places where organic matter is concentrated and decomposition creates similar chemical conditions, low oxygen, maybe some sulfides starting to appear.
Like what kind of places?
Well, active hydrothermal vents for one, cold seeps where methane bubbles up, even localized sites like, say, sunken wood falls, or even the sediments found beneath fish farms, unfortunately.
Huh. So there are specialists in certain conditions, not necessarily certain locations, like just whale falls.
That's a great way to put it. They seem to be generalists when it comes to exploiting specific nutrient conditions and chemical signatures, rather than being strictly tied only to whale carcasses. Their presence across these diverse deep-sea environments really speaks to their incredible versatility and dispersal ability in the deep ocean.
2.4, the sulfophilic chemosynthetic stage. Okay, this is where, for me, it gets really interesting. Moving beyond just eating the decaying flesh and the enriched mud, how do the bones themselves manage to sustain life for potentially decades or even centuries? What's the magic trick there? Because bone seems pretty inert.
Right, it does seem inert, but it's packed with energy. This is arguably the most fascinating and definitely the most enduring stage of a whale fall, and it's centered around a process called chemosynthesis.
Chemosynthesis, okay.
So as the soft tissues are consumed and the enrichment opportunists have done their thing, the primary remaining source of energy within the whale fall is the vast amount of lipids, fats, and oils stored within the bones themselves. Whalebone is incredibly oily.
I didn't realize bones had that much oil.
Oh yes, especially large whale bones. These lipids then undergo anaerobic decomposition. That means they break down in the absence of oxygen deep within the bone matrix and the surrounding sediments. A key chemical byproduct of this anaerobic decomposition is the production of hydrogen sulfide, H2S, the stuff that smells like rotten eggs.
And hydrogen sulfide is usually toxic, right?
Yeah.
For most life forms. How does that help life flourish?
That's the crucial pivot, exactly.
Yeah.
While it is toxic to many, maybe most organisms, hydrogen sulfide becomes the primary energy source for a whole specialized group of bacteria. These bacteria are chemosynthetic, which means they produce their own food. They create organic matter not from sunlight like plants do through photosynthesis, but from the chemical energy contained in inorganic compounds, in this case, hydrogen sulfide. These chemosynthetic bacteria then form the absolute base of an entirely new and essentially independent food web, one that doesn't rely on any energy trickling down from the sunlit surface.
Wow.
The organisms that thrive here, feeding on these bacteria or on other organisms that feed on the bacteria, are called sulfophilic, literally meaning sulfur-loving.
So it's like a hidden underground or under-sediment factory of life powered entirely by chemicals instead of solar panels.
Exactly that. This whole process is a direct parallel to the unique life we find thriving around deep-sea hydrothermal vents, where superheated mineral-rich fluids spew from the seafloor.
Black smokers and things like that.
Precisely. And also cold seeps, where methane and other hydrocarbons slowly seep from the seabed. In all these diverse environments, vents, seeps, and whale falls, it's chemical energy, not light energy, that drives the entire ecosystem.
That's incredible.
It really highlights this hidden, chemically driven biosphere deep within the ocean. It shows how life finds a way to flourish even in the complete absence of sunlight, transforming seemingly inhospitable chemical conditions into these vibrant, unique communities.
2.5. the reef stage, if applicable.
And then finally, there's potentially one more stage. Once the vast majority of the organic material, including those bone lipids, has been consumed, and the chemosynthetic activity driven by sulfide production naturally dwindles after many decades, or maybe even a century or more, the remaining whale skeleton, the clean bones, can still play a vital ecological role.
How so? If the food's gone?
Well, it provides a hard substrate, a solid surface to attach to. And in the deep sea, which is predominantly just soft, muddy seafloor over vast areas, finding a hard surface is incredibly rare. It's prime real estate.
Ah, okay, like finding a rock in the middle of a desert.
Exactly. So these bones can then be colonized by various filter feeders and suspension feeders. Things like certain types of deep sea anemones or barnacles or sponges that need a firm place to anchor themselves. Over time, this colonization can effectively create a small, localized, reef-like structure on the abyssal plain.
So the whale skeleton becomes sort of an apartment building for new tenants, essentially, a habitat structure.
That's a great way to think about it, yeah. Now, it's worth noting, not every single whale fall necessarily progresses to a distinct, long-lasting reef stage that persists for centuries. It probably depends on currents, sedimentation rates, local fauna, but it clearly demonstrates the multifaceted role that a single whale carcass can play over a really extended period. It transforms from being primarily a concentrated food source in the early stages to creating a long-term, stable, physical habitat in the later stages, influencing the deep-sea landscape long after that initial feast is over.
Okay, maybe this is a good spot to just pause for a second, quickly recap.
Mm-hmm.
We've journeyed through the life cycle of a whale fall, right?
Yeah.
Starting with the mobile scavenger stage, the big guys like sharks and hagfish cleaning up the soft tissue.
Right, the rapid response team.
Then the enrichment opportunist stage, where smaller worms and crustaceans feast on the enriched sediment and leftovers.
Taking advantage of the lingering nutrients.
Followed by the really long-lasting sulfophilic or chemosynthetic stage, powered by bacteria using sulfide from decomposing bone lipids. That's where we find things like the Osidax worms.
The sulfur lovers,
Yeah.
An ecosystem independent of sunlight.
And finally, potentially the reef stage, where the bare bones become hard substrate, a habitat for filter feeders.
Providing structure in the deep.
It's an incredible, predictable sequence. So let's zoom in now on some of the unique life found there, especially those famous bone eaters. 3. Unique biodiversity and specialist species, the bone eaters. 3.1. Key, unique, and endemic species discovered. You mentioned unique species earlier, and we touched on the opportunists being found elsewhere. But are there creatures that only live on these whale falls, or perhaps only on these kinds of deep-sea reducing habitats? Are they truly unique?
Yeah, this raises a really important question, and it's one that actively challenges some long-held scientific assumptions about the deep sea. Traditionally, because the deep ocean environment seems so vast and relatively uniform in terms of temperature and darkness over large scales.
Right, you'd expect species to be widespread.
Exactly. The thinking was that deep-sea species probably had vast geographic ranges. But the discoveries made at these unique sort of isolated habitats like whale falls, yes, but also hydrothermal vents, cold seeps, even underwater mountains called seamounts, are increasingly challenging this idea. Instead, what we're finding is that many highly specialized, sometimes even endemic species have been discovered.
Endemic meaning they're found nowhere else.
Precisely. Found only in that specific type of habitat, or maybe even only in a specific geographic region within that habitat type.
So these whale falls and vents and seeps, they're like evolutionary laboratories, potentially creating unique life forms.
That's a good way to think about it. They provide unique selective pressures and opportunities. The most iconic examples from whale falls are undoubtedly the Osidax bone-eating worms, which we'll definitely dig into more in a moment. But we've also found other highly specialized creatures, like certain types of bone-eating deep-sea snails, the genus Rubispira, for example.
Snails that eat bone.
Apparently so. And what's particularly fascinating about Osidax, thinking about their distribution, is that while the genus seems widespread species have been found in the Pacific, Atlantic, Southern Ocean individual species might have more restricted ranges. For example, species like Osidax deceptionensis and Osidax antarcticus were found on implanted whale bones off Smith Island in the Antarctic, but they were about 1,800 kilometers apart. This suggests a pattern where species within the genus might be speciating, evolving into distinct species, perhaps south of the polar front in the Southern Ocean.
So even within this specialized group, new species are still evolving and adapting to local conditions.
It certainly seems that way. And these newer research efforts, which benefit from much higher resolution sampling using ROVs and advanced molecular methods like DNA sequencing, are allowing us to more rigorously examine these questions about dispersal distances and species ranges across the vast ocean floor. We're getting a much more nuanced picture than before.
3.2. The specialized role of Ozidax bone-eating worms. Okay, let's really unpack these Ozidax worms now, because the idea of bone-eating worms that manage to survive without a mouth or a gut, I mean, it's just mind-boggling. This truly goes against everything you'd expect from an animal that feeds.
It truly is one of the most remarkable adaptations discovered in the deep sea. Yeah, it
Right.
really showcases evolution's incredible ingenuity when faced with a novel resource. So the adult female Ozidax worm, and it's mostly the females we see, is typically a small, cylindrical, sort of whitish, translucent creature, maybe a few millimeters to perhaps a centimeter long, depending on the species.
Okay, quite small then.
Relatively small, yes. They possess this crown of feathery plumes called palps that emerge from the top part of their body, or trunk. These palps are often reddish due to hemoglobin and are used for absorbing oxygen directly from the seawater. And crucially, as you noted, they possess neither a mouth nor an obvious gut. That's what makes their feeding mechanism so utterly unique and, frankly, baffling when first discovered.
So, okay, if they don't have a mouth or a gut to digest, how do they actually get the nutrients out of the solid bone?
Right. This brings us to their ingenious biological mechanism. Instead of a mouth or a gut, they have this unique structure often called a root system. It's not like a plant root, but it's a mass of tissue, sometimes bulbous, sometimes more lobed and branching, that is embedded directly and deeply within the whalebone matrix itself. They actually bore into the bone.
They bore into it.
We think they secrete acids to dissolve the mineral part of the bone, allowing the root tissues to penetrate. But the key is what happens inside those roots. This complex root system doesn't actually digest the bone components itself. Rather, it harbors dense colonies of symbiotic bacteria, specialist bacteria.
Ah, bacteria again. Like in the chemosynthesis stage.
Exactly. These specialized symbiotic bacteria are the ones actually responsible for breaking down and digesting the rich lipids, the fats and oils that are so abundant within the whalebone. The worm then absorbs these digested nutrients, released by the bacteria, directly through the tissues of its root system. It's an incredibly efficient partnership, this close association between the worm and its internal bacterial farmers, if you like.
Wow, so the worm is basically a house and oxygen supplier for the bacteria. And the bacteria are the external digestive system. That's astounding. And what about their reproduction? Is it as unusual as their feeding?
Their reproductive strategies are also highly intriguing and have definitely been quite puzzling for scientists at times. It's not straightforward. For some species, like Ozidax rubiclumis and Ozidax francopressi, researchers discovered microscopic dwarf males. Tiny, tiny males living almost hidden inside the gelatinous tubes secreted by the much larger females.
Dwarf males living inside the female.
Yes. This led to an initial hypothesis that perhaps sex in Ozidax might be environmentally determined. The idea was that maybe larvae settling directly onto exposed whale bones would mature into females, needing the roots and bacteria, whereas larvae that happened to land on an existing female, maybe lacking the right cue or space to develop roots, would instead develop into these tiny, simplified males, essentially just there to produce sperm.
Okay, that makes a sort of sense for a patchy resource like a whale fall.
It does, but, and this highlights the diversity within the genus, not all Ozidax species seem to conform to this seemingly simple pattern. For instance, in detailed studies of Ozidax japonicus, despite looking closely at many mature female specimens, no dwarf males were found inside their tubes. Similarly, Ozidax muciflorus, another species, also seems to lack these dwarf males, even after examining over 50 specimens.
So what's happening with them? How do they reproduce?
Well, for Ozidax japonicus, researchers observed numerous eggs developing within the female's body, specifically in the oviduct, and also found many early-stage embryos, called trochophores, just floating in the transparent mucus surrounding the female's external tube. This suggests potentially different, more complex reproductive modes across the Ozidax genus. Maybe some species release sperm into the water, maybe fertilization happens differently. We're still figuring out the full picture. It's clearly varied.
So even within this single bizarre group of worms, there's this incredible variation in something as fundamental as reproduction. How do scientists even tell all these different Ozidax species apart then, if they can be so variable?
That's a great question. The morphological differences, the physical characteristics among Ozidax species, are actually often quite marked, and they are critically significant for telling them apart. It's not always easy, but there are clear distinctions. For example, species can differ significantly in their overall size, the color of their palps, some are bright red, others paler, the specific form and length of their oviduct where the eggs develop, and perhaps most importantly, the detailed shape and complexity of their internal root structure.
So the roots look different between species.
Yes, quite different. Sometimes some are bulbous, some are highly branched. Also, the tiny projections on the palps, called pinnules, some species have numerous pinnules only on the outer margins of each palp, while others might have them on the inner margins. These seem like small details, but they are consistent within a species. These subtle but consistent morphological distinctions, when carefully observed, allow scientists to confidently differentiate between species. And crucially, the validity of these visual morphological determinations has been robustly confirmed through molecular phylogeny, basically, by comparing their DNA sequences, particularly genes like COI. The genetic fingerprint provides independent evidence that supports the physical differences we see, giving us high confidence in these species delineations.
Broader ecological role of whale falls. Interconnected deep-sea worlds. 4.1. Whale falls as deep-sea oases and biodiversity hotspots.
So if we take a step back and connect all this amazing biology to the bigger ecological picture, whale falls fundamentally serve as what we often call deep-sea oases.
Oases.
They locally concentrate food resources in a way that's just unparalleled in the background deep sea. And this drastically increases both the biodiversity, meaning the variety of different species present, and also the faunal density, simply the sheer number of individual animals packed into that area compared to the surrounding seafloor. They are, in essence, true hotspots of life, thriving in what is otherwise a cold, dark, and generally very food-limited world.
So they're not just a biological curiosity, but actually a crucial part of the deep-sea landscape.
Yeah.
Something that completely changes the rules locally.
Absolutely, you got it. The presence of these enriched zones actively counters that general perception some might have of the deep sea as being ecologically uniform or, monotonous, is anything but in these spots. Instead, they showcase these incredible pockets of intense biological activity and specialization. They demonstrate that even in the most extreme environments, like the abyssal plains, concentrated resources can foster this amazing burst of life and unique adaptation. It really changes our understanding of how life is distributed and how it thrives in the deep.
4.2. Evolutionary stepping stones and dispersal corridors. Okay, so they're hotspots, but are they just isolated islands of life then? Or do they somehow play a larger role in connecting the deep ocean, perhaps bridging the vast distances between these resource patches?
That's one of the most intriguing hypotheses in deep sea ecology right now. Are they connected? What's fascinating here is the idea that whale falls may indeed act as evolutionary stepping stones or maybe dispersal corridors for certain deep sea species, particularly the specialists.
Stepping stones, how would that work?
Well, they provide these temporary on geological scales, but long-lasting on ecological scales, habitats that specialized deep-sea species can colonize. Then, from one whale fall, these species, or perhaps more likely their larvae drifting in the currents, could potentially use other whale falls, maybe tens or hundreds of kilometers away, to hop across vast stretches of the barren seafloor. Stretches that would otherwise be completely impassable for them due to the extreme lack of resources.
Right, because normally ecological similarity decreases with distance.
Exactly. Distance decay relationships are very common. But whale falls, scattered across the seafloor like islands, could provide those critical links, those refueling stops, needed to overcome these natural barriers to dispersal.
So they're like service stations on a long, dark, deep-sea highway, allowing certain creatures to travel much farther than they otherwise could.
That's a very apt analogy, yes. This theory suggests they could facilitate gene flow between otherwise isolated populations, and by reducing that genetic isolation, they could significantly influence how deep-sea species spread, how they maintain their populations, and ultimately how they evolve over geological timescales.
Has this been proven?
Proving it definitively across vast ocean basins is incredibly challenging, of course. It requires detailed genetic studies of populations from multiple whale falls over large distances. But the ecological logic is strong, and the data we do have on species overlap between sites is certainly suggestive. It paints a picture of a potentially much more interconnected deep-sea world, at least for some species, than we perhaps once imagined.
4.3. Interconnections with hydrothermal vents and cold seeps.
And this idea of interconnectedness raises another important question. If these deep-sea environments, like whale falls, are so unique with their specialized life, are they truly isolated from other extreme deep-sea habitats? Or are there deeper, more fundamental connections between them?
I'm guessing, given the chemosynthesis angle we discussed earlier, there probably is a connection, right?
Hmm.
Especially with vents and seeps.
You're absolutely right. There appears to be a profound interconnectedness, and it really speaks volumes about the remarkable adaptability of life in these extreme environments. Many of the core chemosynthetic processes, the bacterial pathways using sulfide or methane, and even some of the specific opportunistic species found at whale falls are also characteristic of these other chemically driven deep sea ecosystems, namely hydrothermal vents and cold seeps.
So you find the same kinds of worms and things in all these places?
Sometimes, yes, or at least very closely related species. For instance, specific types of polychaete worms, like those Ophryotrocha and Victorniella we mentioned earlier, and certain types of mollusks and crustaceans are reported from all of these different reducing habitats, whale falls, vents, and seeps.
Oh.
This significant overlap strongly suggests either a shared evolutionary history for some of these groups, adapting to similar chemical challenges, or at least a significant ongoing dispersal potential among these various deep-sea extremophile communities. They're not completely isolated worlds. In fact, recent studies have even identified new species of specialized bacterivorous worms, like certain Chrysopetalidae and Microphthalmidae, inhabiting hot vents way over in the Indian Ocean, further blurring these lines that once seemed quite distinct.
Okay, so whale falls, vents, and seeps are connected chemically and biologically. What about other kinds of stuff that thinks? Like if a big tree trunk falls to the deep sea, does it also create similar kind of ecosystem with osedacs and things?
That's an excellent point to bring up because it allows us to highlight a really sharp contrast and emphasize the specificity we see. While other large organic falls, such as wood falls from trees washed out to sea, do create localized ecosystems and support unique life. They differ significantly from whale falls in the types of specialized organisms they support.
How so?
While specific experiments have been done, for example in the Antarctic, placing pristine wood blocks right next to whale bones on the seafloor. The results were clear. The Osedax bone-eating worms, or their larvae, successfully colonized the bone packages within less than a year, readily establishing themselves. But in stark contrast, specialized wood-boring bivalves, clams from the Xylophiginae subfamily, which are the key players in degrading woodfalls, did not colonize the nearby whale bones at all. And similarly, Osedax didn't colonize the wood.
Oh, so very picky eaters.
Extremely picky. It demonstrates a clear substrate specificity for these highly adapted deep-sea inhabitants. Osedax needs bone lipids, Xylophiga needs wood cellulose. Xylophiga species like exfoliata, extubulata, and many others are fascinating in their own right. They create these complex borings within the wood, and quantitative measurements show they have a really significant ecosystem function as keystone species in breaking down woodfalls.
And do they have weird reproduction too?
Interestingly, yes. Like Osedax, many Xylophiga species also exhibit sexual dimorphism in the form of dwarf males, presumably for similar reasons related to finding mates in a patchy habitat. And there are other wood-eroding organisms too, like specialized deep-sea limpets, that play a significant role. So woodfalls create distinct, though perhaps conceptually similar, deep-sea communities based on a different primary resource. It shows how different types of organic input fuel different pathways.
Okay, let's do a quick mega recap here. We've really covered a lot of ground on the biology and ecology. We started with whale falls, these massive carcasses sinking to the deep oligotrophic seafloor, creating nutrient hotspots.
Oases in the deep-sea desert.
We walked through the ecological succession, the mobile scavengers, hagfish, sharks, the enrichment opportunists, worms, amphipods, and the enriched sediment, the long-lasting sulfophilic chemosynthetic stage, bacteria using sulfide from bone lipids, supporting Osedax and others, and the potential reef stage, bones as habitat.
A predictable transformation over time.
We dove into the unique biodiversity, focusing on the Osedax bone-eating worms, their lack of mouthgut, their symbiotic bacteria and root structures, their varied reproduction with sometimes dwarf males.
Truly remarkable adaptations.
We talked about the broader role of whale falls as deep-sea oases and biodiversity hotspots, and potentially as evolutionary stepping stones or dispersal corridors connecting populations across the abyss.
Facilitating gene flow and shaping biogeography.
And we explore the interconnections with other chemosynthetic ecosystems like hydrothermal vents and cold seeps, sharing similar processes and even some species, while contrasting them with distinct woodfall communities dominated by organisms like Xylophiga.
Showing both connections and specializations in the deep.
Some key terms to maybe jot down if you're taking notes: whale fall, oligotrophic, ecological succession and its stages, ozodiacs, chemosynthesis, stepping stones, dispersal corridors, hydrothermal vents, cold seeps, xylophaga, endemic species. Phew! It's incredible how much life and complex interaction can revolve around something that initially seems like just, well, an end, a dead whale. Now, a big question arises. How do we even find and study these incredible sites in the first place, hidden away in the vast, dark, deep ocean? That brings us to the history and methods of exploration. 5. Scientific methods and historical discoveries, peeling back the ocean's layers. You might be wondering, yeah, how do we know all this stuff about the deep sea? These intricate details about bone-eating worms, chemosynthesis, deep-sea ecosystems. This knowledge didn't just appear overnight. It's really built on a rich and fascinating history of human curiosity, scientific innovation, and some pretty daring expeditions that actually span centuries. The dawn of deep-sea exploration.
Absolutely. The journey into deep ocean research has been truly progressive, yeah, marked by these distinct phases of increasing capability and understanding over time. Those early efforts, though perhaps rudimentary by today's standards, were absolutely crucial. They laid the groundwork and sparked that initial scientific curiosity about what lies beneath the waves. A prime example of this pioneering spirit is Captain James Cook's voyages. They began way back in August 1768 on the HMS Endeavour.
Captain Cook. Famous explorer, but involved in science, too.
Oh, very much so. He first gained the attention of the prestigious Royal Society for his meticulous astronomical work observing a solar eclipse in Newfoundland, actually. That skill led to his selection for the big expedition to the South Sea. The primary goal then was to observe Venus crossing the sun, which was a critical astronomical event for calculating distances in the solar system. But exploration and natural history were huge parts of it, too.
So he wasn't just mapping coastlines, he was doing cutting-edge science for his era.
Precisely. And crucially, on his expeditions, Cook brought with him leading scientists of the day. People like Daniel Solander, a Swedish botanist who had worked directly with Carl Linnaeus, the father of taxonomy, and Joseph Banks, a wealthy botanist and patron of science. His second expedition, from 1772 to 1775, on the HMS Resolution and the Adventure, was even more ambitious scientifically and geographically.
What did they achieve?
It was the first expedition known to have successfully crossed the Antarctic Circle. They pushed south, reaching 71 degrees south latitude, coming tantalizingly close within about 75 miles of the Antarctic coast itself. Field ice ultimately forced them to retreat, so they didn't actually sight the fabled Antarctic continent. So close. But nevertheless, his expeditions returned with an unprecedented amount of scientific results and geographical information, particularly mapping vast areas of the Pacific Ocean, more than any previous expedition in history. This work led to his status as a national hero in Britain and his election as a Fellow of the Royal Society. He really set a new standard for scientific exploration, although it took another 50 years before Russian explorers, under Fabian Gottlieb von Bellingshausen, actually confirmed the sighting of the Antarctic continent.
Technological leaps and global expeditions, mid-20th century.
Okay, jumping forward quite a bit. The post-World War II period was truly marked by significant technological advancements. These really revolutionized oceanography, moving it beyond purely exploratory voyages towards more systematic, data-driven research.
This is where things really took off.
You could say that, yeah. Two particularly pivotal global expeditions in this era were the Swedish Albatross expedition, which ran from 1947 to 1948, and the Danish Galathea expedition from 1950 to 1952. These expeditions really pioneered the use of new technologies developed during or just after the war, and they led to major scientific results and breakthroughs across multiple disciplines: geophysics, ocean physics, chemistry, biology.
Could you give an example? What were some of these game-changing technologies they used?
Well, one major contribution, which I have a personal connection to, was the piston core technique developed by my father, Professor Kuhlenberg, for the Albatross expedition.
Oh, wow. So what did it do?
This innovation allowed oceanographers for the first time to retrieve remarkably long and crucially undisturbed sediment cores from the deep sea floor, sometimes over 20 meters in length.
20 meters of mud. Why was that so important?
Because those layers of mud contain a record of Earth's history. Retrieving these long, intact cores was a revolutionary capability. It made possible detailed studies of past sedimentation rates, volcanic ash layers, and, using microfossils trapped in the sediment, understanding climate variability over vast geological timescales. It gave us a much clearer window into Earth's past climate changes.
Amazing. What else?
Another significant development used on the Galathea was the carbon-14 method, adapted by Steen and Nielsen, which allowed for the accurate determination of primary production in the ocean, how much plant life, phytoplankton, is growing. That's a fundamental measure of the ocean's biological productivity. The Galifia expedition also conducted groundbreaking deep-sea trawling operations, dredging up life from the deepest ocean trenches. And interestingly, they utilized the same powerful advanced winch system that had been developed for the heavy piston coring work on the Albatross, showing a synergy between these new geological and biological tools.
So these expeditions really pushed the boundaries.
They really did. And notably, these were efforts by smaller nations, Sweden and Denmark, often relying on individual scientific cooperation rather than massive government programs initially. They truly showed the immense potential for new discoveries about Earth's history and deep-sea life, stimulated new thinking, and also highlighted the need for more training and capacity building in oceanography globally.
The era of international cooperation. Okay, so from these heroic individual and national efforts, it sounds like the focus then shifted towards working together on a truly global scale. How did the world actually come together to study the vastness of the ocean collaboratively? It seems like a massive undertaking, coordinating ships and scientists from different countries.
It was, and it marked a crucial shift. This third phase of modern oceanographic development, really commencing in the late 1950s, was defined by this burgeoning international cooperation. There's this fundamental realization among scientists and increasingly governments that isolated national observations were simply insufficient to understand the big picture.
Why not?
Because ocean processes, like currents and fish stocks, don't respect national boundaries. To gain a realistic and comprehensive understanding of complex ocean conditions, especially large-scale phenomena like ocean circulation, which drives climate, you absolutely needed coordinated observations covering entire ocean regions, ideally simultaneously.
Makes sense.
An initial, really impactful effort that demonstrated this was possible was organized by the International Council for the Exploration of the CICS back in 1958. This was within the framework of the much larger International Geophysical Year, the IGY, which ran from 1957-58. For this specific oceanographic project, they coordinated 22 research vessels from 8 different countries to collaboratively study the Atlantic polar front region, a complex area where different water masses meet. It was a huge logistical challenge, but its success highlighted the feasibility and the scientific value of such large-scale operations.
So that success spurred on more collaboration.
Absolutely. It provided further incentives for developing even broader global cooperation. This momentum notably led to initiatives like the International Decade of Ocean Exploration, or IDOE, in the 1970s, which funded large multinational research projects.
And were there specific organizations created to manage all this?
Yeah.
Or key figures who really championed this global approach?
Yes, definitely. The creation of 2 bodies in 1960 was absolutely pivotal in formalizing and driving this international collaboration forward. First, the Scientific Committee on Oceanic Research, or CESCOR, which is part of the International Council for Science, provided a non-governmental platform for scientists to plan international projects. And second, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, or IOC, established under UNESCO, provided the crucial intergovernmental framework for nations to coordinate their efforts, set standards, and share data. These 2 bodies working together were key. And there were influential individuals, too. Dr. Elizabeth Mann-Borghese, for example, played an extraordinary and leading role. She was a strong advocate for the Law of the Sea negotiations, UNCLOS. She organized critical interdisciplinary meetings in Malta through the International Ocean Institute, IOI, which she founded, bringing together scientists, lawyers, diplomats to discuss ocean governance. Her book, The Oceanic Circle, really emphasized the need for governing the seas as a global resource in a new way. Ambassador Arvid Pardo of Malta was also a key figure, famously proposing the concept of the ocean as the common heritage of mankind at the UN.
So this spirit of cooperation continues today.
Very much so. International efforts are ongoing and perhaps more important than ever, strongly guided now by things like the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, which runs from 2021 to 2030, and the broader UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. These global initiatives are all underpinned by that foundational treaty, UNCLOS, and a whole suite of related agreements covering things like biodiversity, climate change, like the Paris Agreement, and disaster risk reduction. And a cornerstone, a really practical element of this ongoing cooperation, is the IOC's International Oceanographic Data and Information Exchange System, the IODE system, established way back in 1961.
What does IOD do?
It's essentially a worldwide network now comprising over 80 national oceanographic data centers. Their job is to meticulously collect, quality control, archive, and crucially, make freely available millions upon millions of invaluable ocean observations, temperature, salinity, currents, biological data, you name it. Making this data accessible globally is absolutely critical for understanding long-term trends, climate change impacts, and managing resources effectively, especially for things like tracking marine mammals that move across national borders, which requires that kind of centralized data.
Modern exploration vessels and technology. Okay, so with this rich history of exploration, technological leaps, and this vital global framework for cooperation and data sharing firmly in place, what does cutting-edge ocean exploration actually look like today? What are the main tools being used for discovery right now?
Right. Today, we operate with incredibly sophisticated research vessels and advanced underwater technology, very much driven by these international collaborative models we've been discussing. Two really prime examples that perhaps many listeners might have even heard of are the exploration vessel EV Nautilus, operated by the Ocean Exploration Trust, and the NOAA ship Okeanos Explorer, which is operated by the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. These vessels really embody the concept of seeing the deep ocean through new technological eyes, and they both operate under a shared paradigm that includes heavy use of telepresence.
Tell us a bit more about the Nautilus, for example.
Sure. The EV Nautilus is a very efficient, dedicated exploration vessel, about 64 meters long. It's manned by a permanent ship's crew, but also hosts a rotating core of exploration scientists, engineers, educators, communicators. It's equipped with state-of-the-art seafloor mapping systems, like a high-resolution multi-beam echo sounder that creates detailed 3D maps of the seabed. And crucially, it carries two advanced remote-operated vehicles, or ROVs, named Hercules and Argus. These are the tethered robots that go down and act as our eyes, hands, and samplers in the deep.
What can Hercules do?
Hercules is a pretty powerful machine. It's close to 4 meters long, weighs over 2 tons in air. It can move around precisely, ascend or descend relatively quickly, and it's packed with technology. It has incredibly powerful LED lights. We're talking tens of thousands of lumens each to illuminate the darkness, and multiple cameras, including a main high-definition camera capable of capturing broadcast-quality video and high-resolution still images. It also has manipulator arms for collecting biological and geological samples and sophisticated navigation systems using acoustics to pinpoint its location thousands of meters below the ship, plus labs on the ship for initial sample processing.
That's a serious piece of kit. But
Yeah.
you mentioned telepresence. How do all those people ashore actually get to be part of the live exploration from vessels like Nautilus or Okeanos?
Yes, telepresence technology. This is really a cornerstone of modern ocean exploration, and it's transforming how we do the science. The Nautilus Live website, for instance, streams live video feeds directly from the ROVs, Hercules, and Argus, and also from various locations around the ship in real time, 247 when they're on expedition. This website serves as a central, interactive portal into the ongoing exploration. Since they started streaming back in 2010, these live feeds have garnered, I believe, over 16 million views from people in more than 130 countries. It's incredible reach.
So anyone can watch the exploration live?
Anyone with an internet connection, yes. It effectively erases the geographic and physical boundaries that used to exist between the ship at sea and scientists, students, and the public back on shore. Similarly, the NOAA ship Okeanos Explorer also fully integrates live streaming video and audio into its operating model. They have a dedicated system allowing shoreside scientists, who might be experts on corals or geology or whatever, to actively participate in the dives.
How do they participate?
They can communicate directly with the ROV pilots and the scientists on the ship via a satellite link and a web interface. They can see the live video, see the data coming in, and provide real-time expertise, suggesting where to sample, what features to investigate more closely. It's like having a virtual science team distributed across the globe.
That must be incredibly valuable.
It absolutely is. It brings a much wider range of expertise to bear on the exploration than could possibly fit on the ship itself. And it also allows them to connect directly with classrooms, museums, and other learning institutions for real-time outreach during expeditions, inspiring that next generation.
And what about the actual discoveries these modern expeditions are making using these tools? Can you give some examples?
Oh, the discoveries are truly profound and are constantly rewriting our understanding of the deep sea. For example, NOAA's Office of Ocean Exploration and Research, OER, primarily using the Okeanos Explorer, ran a major multi-year campaign called Capstone Campaign to address Pacific monument science, technology, and ocean needs from 2015 to 2018. The goal was to collect critical baseline information on completely unexplored deep-water habitats, mostly below 250 meters, within several large U.S. marine-protected areas in the Pacific, places like Papahanaumokokia, the Marianas Trench Marine National Monument.
And what did they find?
An incredible amount. During Capstone, they conducted 24-hour operations, mapping vast areas and conducting numerous ROV dives. They collected hundreds of biological specimens, many of which represented potentially new species of science or were new records for that specific area, or significantly extended the known range of a species. For instance, in the Johnston Atoll unit, they collected 46 biological specimens, possibly including 2 new arthropods, a new tunicate, new sponges, mollusks, sea stars, sea cucumbers. The list goes on. They also collected hundreds of geological samples, providing crucial insights into the geologic history of Pacific seamounts and mapping out deep-sea mineral deposits like ferromanganese crusts. Just the mapping alone was huge. In 2017 alone, the Okeanos Explorer mapped over 250,000 square kilometers of previously unmapped U.S. seafloor. That's an area larger than the state of Oregon, mapped in high resolution in just 1 year.
Incredible scale. Any specific biological discoveries that stand out?
There were many. For example, exploring the musicians' seamounts north of Hawaii seamounts, named after famous composers like Bach, Mozart, Beethoven. Nice theme. Yeah. That expedition, aptly named the Deep Sea Symphony, found some of the greatest numbers of high-density deep-sea coral and sponge communities encountered during the entire Capstone campaign. Just spectacular gardens of life on these underwater mountains. Sites like Shostakovich Seamount had these predominant bamboo corals that were 3 meters tall and 2 meters wide, forming dense thickets. Paganini Seamount supported diverse fields of beautiful gold corals from the family Chrysogorgiidae. Mendelssohn Seamount hosted patches of precious corals.
Why are these coral gardens so important?
These deep-sea coral and sponge communities are absolutely crucial habitats. They provide structure, shelter, and feeding grounds for a vast array of other deep-sea life, including commercially important fish species. They really foster biodiversity. Plus, many of these organisms are being investigated as potential sources of novel biomedical compounds for new medicines. So, finding and documenting them is vital before they might be impacted by human activities. Another example. Expeditions in the Gulf of Mexico, using the Okeanos Explorer, documented unexpectedly extensive deep-sea coral communities, including a really spectacular garden dominated by the stony coral Madrepora oculata. They also explored chemosynthetic communities at brine pools and asphalt seeps down there, and get this. On over half of the ROV dives they conducted in the Gulf, they documented species that were potentially new to science or observed behaviors that had never been seen before.
Half the dives found something potentially new. That really shows how much we still have to learn.
It absolutely does. Even in a relatively well-studied area like the Gulf of Mexico, we saw unexpected observations too, like documenting a deep-sea snail preying upon a crinoid, a sea lily. That kind of interaction was previously really only known from Paleozoic fossils, hundreds of millions of years old. Or seeing a type of benthic jellyfish, Tychogastria, in the Central Pacific when it was previously mostly known from polar oceans. These finds constantly challenge our assumptions.
And it's not just biology and geology, right? Sometimes they find human history, too.
That's right. Deep-sea exploration also reveals surprising aspects of human history. For example, the Okeanos ROV, Deep Discoverer, investigated a World War II period shipwreck identified as a rhino barge, a type of floating pontoon used for offloading vehicles and supplies during amphibious landings lying at nearly 800 meters depth in the Pacific. Mapping efforts off the U.S. East Coast have also used advanced sonar, like synthetic aperture sonar, to locate historic shipwrecks, including submarines off Rhode Island. The deep sea preserves history in unexpected ways.
So it's clear these modern tools and the telepresence approach are driving discovery at an unprecedented rate. And you mentioned education, too.
Yes, education and outreach are integral parts of these programs. OER, for instance, actively fosters STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math. They have a network of alliance partners, aquariums, science centers, museums across the country. Through these partners, OER holds workshops, introducing hundreds of educators each year to the educational materials developed around the Okeanos Explorer expeditions, providing curriculum resources they can use in their classrooms. The EV Nautilus has a similar strong focus with its Nautilus Ambassadors program. These are STEM educators who actually sail on the ship as part of the core of exploration. They learn about the technology and the science firsthand, participate in the watches, and importantly, they connect live from the ship back to their classrooms and communities ashore, sharing their experiences and developing new STEM lesson plans based on the real exploration happening. These efforts are crucial for inspiring the next generation of ocean explorers, scientists, and engineers. It really demonstrates a strong commitment not just to discovery, but to sharing that discovery widely.
Wow. Okay, another mega recap point. This section on scientific methods and historical discoveries has been fascinating.
It's quite a story.
We charted the remarkable journey of ocean exploration, starting way back with the pioneering voyages of people like Captain Cook on the HMS Endeavour and Resolution laying the groundwork.
Setting the stage for scientific sea voyages.
Then we saw the transformative technological leaps of the mid-20th century, with expeditions like the Albatross and Galathea and key inventions like the piston core technique.
Revolutionizing our ability to sample the deep sea and its history.
That led into the era of major international cooperation, spurred by events like the International Geophysical Year, IGY, and programs like the International Decade of Ocean Exploration, IDOE, supported by crucial organizations like SIXCAR and the IOC.
Recognizing the need to work together on a global scale.
And that brings us to today's cutting-edge exploration. Using sophisticated vessels like the EV Nautilus and NOAA ship Okeanos Explorer, equipped with advanced mapping and ROVs like Hercules and Argus.
Our modern eyes and hands in the deep.
A key enabling technology is telepresence, allowing real-time global participation and collaboration. And these efforts, like NOAA's Capstone campaign, are revealing incredible biodiversity hotspots, like the coral gardens on the Musician Seamounts or around the Johnston Atoll Unit, JAU, exploring unique geological features like the IE Seamount hydrothermal vents, and even uncovering human history like sunken rhino barges.
Constantly expanding our knowledge and challenging our assumptions.
Key terms here: Captain Cook, Piston Core Technique, IGY, IDOE, SCORE, IOC EV Nautilus, NOAA, Ship Okeanos Explorer, ROV Hercules Argus, Telepresence, Capstone, Musician Seamounts, Johnston Atoll Unit, Lehigh Seamount, Rhino Barge. It's clear how far we've come in peeling back the ocean's layers, from Cook's sails to today's live-streaming robots. So now let's shift focus a bit. We've looked deep, but how do these insights connect to the challenges we face closer to shore in our coastal waters? 6. Factors influencing marine communities and conservation efforts. 6.1. Coastal ecosystems. California's unique marine environment. We've spent a lot of time plumbing the really deep, remote parts of the ocean, but maybe let's bring it closer to home for many people. What can these kinds of insights from deep-sea discoveries tell us, if anything, about our coastal ecosystems? Areas where human impact is much more direct and visible.
That's a really important connection to make. And yes, if we connect this to the bigger picture, I think the profound deep-sea discoveries we've discussed, the hidden ecosystems, the incredible resilience of life in extreme conditions, the surprising interconnectedness of habitats, even across vast distances, they actually enhance our appreciation and deepen our understanding for the marine environments that are much closer to shore. They give us context.
How so?
Well, they remind us of the complexity and often the fragility of marine ecosystems everywhere. Take California's Central Coast, for example. There are 2 large national park units there, Point Reyes National Seashore, PO-URI, just north of San Francisco, and Golden Gate National Recreation Area, GOGA, which includes parts of San Francisco and Marin County. Together, these parks encompass a really remarkable stretch of coastline about 191 miles, or 307 kilometers running from Tamales Bay down to Half Moon Bay.
That's a significant chunk of the California coast.
Yeah.
What makes it so special ecologically? Why focus there?
This specific region boasts exceptionally high biological diversity, and a major reason for that is the convergence of 2 distinct marine ecological provinces. The cooler northern California current waters meeting influences from the warmer southern waters, particularly in the southern part of GOGA. Plus, you have this unique upland marine margin, where terrestrial habitats directly meet the ocean, creating a huge variety of niches.
What kind of habitats?
Oh, everything. You've got windswept sandy beaches, craggy coastal cliffs, extensive marine terraces formed by past sea level changes, coastal scrub and forests on the uplands, productive salt marshes, estuaries like Tamales Bay and Drake's Estuary, coniferous forests. It's an incredible mosaic. And this habitat diversity supports an astonishing array of life. Get this. Over 45% of all North American avian species have been recorded in these parks, and nearly 18% of all of California's native plant species are found within these boundaries. It's a real biodiversity hotspot right next to a major urban area.
Wow. But being next to an urban area must bring challenges.
Absolutely. And that's another interesting aspect. This area has supported human use for over 5,000 years, from indigenous populations to Spanish explorers, ranchers, and now urban development. So there's this continuum of land use values and impacts. Interestingly, Point Reyes, PRE, and the northern parts of GOGA, which are managed by Point Reyes, still exhibit relatively minimal direct urban disturbance. They're dominated more by coastal scrub, forests, and, importantly, historical ranch lands, whereas the areas south of the Golden Gate Bridge, within GOGA proper, are significantly impacted by surrounding urban development. Often, the protected parklands there are just narrow strips along the coastline, squeezed by the city. This contrast makes it a fascinating place to study different kinds of human pressures on coastal ecosystems.
This is point two, water quality and stressors.
And despite their protected status as national parks, the health of these vibrant coastal ecosystems is under constant pressure from various sources. Water quality, which is such a fundamental indicator of ecosystem health, is significantly impacted. These impacts come from both point sources, where you can identify a specific discharge point, like a pipe.
Right. And perhaps more pervasively, from non-point sources, where pollution comes from diffuse runoff across the landscape. And these pollutants originate both within the parklands and significantly outside park boundaries. So it's not just what's happening right on the coast itself or within the park. Stuff from upstream matters a lot.
Exactly. External threats are substantial, especially for the more urbanized parts of Georgia. These can include atmospheric deposition of pollutants, leading to things like stream acidification, and, very importantly, upstream industrial, urban, and agricultural pollutants that flow down rivers and creeks into the park's estuaries and nearshore waters.
And internal sources inside the parks.
Yes, internal sources are also significant, often stemming from recreational practices, and, as I mentioned, those historical land uses that were sort of grandfathered in when the parks were created. For example, Point Reyes and northern Georgia still have numerous active cattle ranches and dairies, as well as pasture lands. These agricultural operations contribute significantly to water degradation, primarily through excessive nutrient enrichment, nitrogen and phosphorus, from animal feces washing into streams, especially during winter rains. Horse stables and corrals within the parks are also identified sources of elevated nutrients and sometimes copper.
What about human waste? Septic systems.
That's another issue, particularly near developed areas adjacent to the parks. Failing septic system leach fields from surrounding communities can cause significant nutrient and pathogen loading into critical creeks, like Lagunitas Creek in Point Reyes, which supports endangered salmon, and Redwood Creek in Georgia. Research done just outside Georgia at Stinson Beach actually found nutrient signals traced back to community septic systems, and these were linked to increased algae growth in the nearshore waters.
Okay, so you have these excess nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus getting into the water. What are the ecological consequences? What does that actually do to the local wildlife and plants?
Well, elevated concentrations of nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus can trigger really dramatic and usually undesirable shifts in the natural biological communities. In streams and estuaries, it can lead to algal blooms. In terrestrial areas near coasts, it can change the vegetation, often paving the way for non-native invasive species to take over, because many invasives thrive in these artificially nutrient-rich conditions. The overall result is often a reduction in native biodiversity.
You mentioned estuaries.
Yes, nitrogen loading in shallow estuarine embayments like parts of Tamales Bay can be particularly problematic. It can lead to these fundamental shifts where dense mats of macroalgae seaweed start to smother and replace beneficial, ecologically critical eelgrass beds.
And why is losing eelgrass bad?
Eelgrass is incredibly important habitat. It provides nursery grounds for fish and crabs, stabilizes sediments, improves water clarity, so losing it is a major blow. And the decomposition of those excessive algae blooms can also lead to sharp declines in dissolved oxygen levels in the water, creating hypoxic or dead zones, which further alters the structure of bottom-dwelling communities and negatively impacts fish and other organisms all the way up the food web.
And invasive species are a problem too.
Yes, invasive species, both plant and animal, pose medium to high-level threats in these coastal parks. While perhaps less intensely studied within Peoria and Goja compared to the main San Francisco Bay, which is considered one of the most heavily invaded estuaries globally due to shipping, ballast water, recreational boating, etc., invasive species are established in the park estuaries and lagoons, albeit maybe at lower levels currently. But species like Ammophila, the European beach grass planted for dune stabilization, can spread rapidly and completely alter dune ecosystems, undermining expensive removal efforts. Despite these threats, some areas like Tamales Bay and Drake's Estero are still considered relatively pristine compared to other estuaries nearby and support generally healthy biological communities, which makes protecting them even more critical.
What about physical changes like erosion?
Right. Coastal watershed erosion is also a significant issue. It's partly a natural process in this geologically active region with inherently unstable slopes and coastal bluffs, but it's definitely exacerbated by human-caused disturbances, things like poorly sited trails, road cuts, and vegetation clearing for development or agriculture. These activities alter natural surface water drainage patterns and frequently trigger slope failures and landslides, dumping excess sediment into streams and estuaries.
More sediments abandoned. I thought you said some beaches were sediment-starved.
It's complex. Yes, some beaches do seem to be sediment-starved, potentially an unintended consequence of upstream dams on major rivers like the Sacramento and San Joaquin, reducing the natural supply of sand reaching the central coast over decades. But conversely, some enclosed embayments like Tamales Bay, Drake's Bay, and Bolinas Lagoon seem to be experiencing higher than normal sedimentation rates, filling in faster than they naturally would, partly due to that watershed erosion we just discussed. So it's an imbalance, maybe not enough sand on the beaches, too much mud in the estuaries.
Managing all this must require a lot of monitoring.
Absolutely. Water quality monitoring is crucial for understanding these complex issues, tracking trends, identifying pollution sources, and evaluating the effectiveness of management actions. Point Reyes, for instance, began regular ambient surface water quality monitoring back in 1999, focusing initially on Alima Creek, which is critical habitat for threatened salmon, and flows into Tamales Bay, a bay listed by the state as impaired for pathogens, sediments, nutrients, and mercury. GOGA has conducted monitoring even longer, since the late 1980s, often focusing on areas like Lower Redwood Creek due to concerns about nutrient and bacteria inputs from upstream sources.
What kind of things do they measure? What are the key indicators?
They monitor a range of physical, chemical, and biological indicators. Specific conductance, for example, measures the water's ability to conduct electricity, which is related to the amount of dissolved salts and ions. High values can indicate saltwater intrusion or pollution from things like dairy runoff. They have thresholds like values over 850 microsiemens per centimeter might impact sensitive freshwater life, and over 1,700 could be toxic. Data shows high values are mostly found at estuarine sites or near dairies. Turbidity measures water cloudiness, basically how much suspended sediment is in the water. High turbidity can harm fish gills, smother bottom habitats, and block sunlight needed by aquatic plants. Monitoring showed some high turbidity events, especially after storms, and very importantly, they monitor fecal indicator bacteria. These aren't necessarily harmful themselves, but they indicate the potential presence of pathogens from human or animal waste. They test for total coliforms, fecal coliforms, E. coli, and Enterococcus, comparing results to establish water quality criteria for safe recreation.
And have they found problems?
Yes, historical data showed several creeks frequently exceeded criteria, particularly near ranches or areas with potential septic influence. One site even recorded levels far exceeding the total coliform criteria. The EPA now recommends using E. coli for freshwater and Enterococcus for marine water as the best indicators because they have the strongest correlation with swimming-related illnesses. So monitoring these bacteria is really key for public health protection as well as ecosystem health.
6.3, marine mammal ecology and fishery interactions. Okay, so that covers water quality issues. But staying near the coast, what about the ocean's most, charismatic megafauna? The seals, dolphins, whales. How do human activities, particularly things like fishing, intersect with marine mammal populations in these coastal areas?
Right, this is another crucial and often complex area of research and management. It's highlighted by the ongoing work of groups like the ICES Working Group on Marine Mammal Ecology, WGMME, which tries to understand these interactions scientifically.
So what are some examples? Let's talk seals first.
Okay. Harbor seals, Phoca vitulina, are common along many North Atlantic and Pacific coasts. Surveys in regions like the Skagerrak, between Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, show their populations have generally been increasing, though with fluctuations. In the Wadden Sea, that large tidal flat system along the coasts of the Netherlands, Germany, and Denmark, there's a fantastic long-term data set, a 40-year time series from 1974 to 2014, that has allowed scientists to really investigate their recovery processes after historical declines due to hunting and pollution.
How do they recover?
The study showed how historical differences in regional management when protection measures were put in place significantly influenced the timing and speed of their recovery in different parts of the Wadden Sea. Their populations were hit hard by epidemics of the Fosin distemper virus, PDV, in 1988 and again in 2002. Mortality rates reached nearly 50% during those events.
Wow, devastating.
Very. But remarkably, between and after these epidemics, the harbor seal population showed incredible resilience. Their growth rate bounced back to close to the maximum possible intrinsic exponential rate for seals, which is around 12–13% per year. Although in more recent years, the growth based on counts during the molt season seems to have leveled off a bit, though pup counts are still increasing. In 2017, the estimate was almost 26,000 harbor seals in the Wadden Sea area, a significant recovery.
Okay, what about other marine mammals like dolphins and porpoises? Are they monitored too?
Yes, cetacean observations, whales, dolphins, porpoises also provide crucial data for understanding their distribution and potential interactions. For instance, studies using ferry routes or dedicated surveys off Dunkirk, France, in the English Channel, have monitored cetacean sightings over multiple sessions. They observed 3 main species there: the white-beaked dolphin, the bottlenose dolphin, though only rarely, and most commonly, the harbor porpoise.
And what did they learn about the porpoises?
The harbor porpoise observations showed high seasonality. They were much more common at certain times of year. And their distribution varied significantly, even between survey periods. Sometimes they were concentrated offshore Dunkirk and in nearby Belgian waters. Other times they were more numerous further offshore in UK waters. This kind of detailed spatial and temporal data is really vital for informing conservation measures, like managing potential risks from shipping or fishing in specific areas at specific times.
Speaking of fishing, that brings up the issue of competition, right? Do seals eat the same fish people want to catch?
That is a key area of potential conflict, yes. Food resource competition between seals and commercial fisheries. A lot of research aims to objectively compare the estimated quantities of fish consumed by seal populations versus the amounts removed by fisheries in the same area. The goal is to provide sound scientific data to inform management discussions and, frankly, prevent excessive speculations or unfounded claims about seals decimating fish stocks.
How do they make those comparisons?
Some studies put seal consumption into perspective by comparing it not just with fishery catches, but also with estimates of the total fish stock size, and even accounting for fish removal by other predators like larger fish, seabirds, and other marine mammals. It tries to see the whole picture. Research also specifically investigates the degree of prey size overlap. Are seals eating the same size fish that the fisheries are targeting? Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. It's complex.
I've also heard about seals carrying parasites that can end up in fish. Is that a real concern for fisheries, like affecting fish quality or marketability?
Yes, that's another aspect of the interaction. Seals, particularly gray seals, but also harbor seals, are definitive hosts for certain nematode parasites, like Pseudoterranova decipiens, commonly known as codworm or sealworm.
Yeah.
The adult worms live in the seal's stomach, release eggs, the larvae develop in crustaceans that infect fish that eat the crustaceans, and the cycle completes when a seal eats an infected fish.
So more seals means more worms and fish.
A mathematical model suggests that, generally, yes, an increase in seal numbers would likely increase the number of adult parasites reproducing within the seals. This would lead to more free-living larval stages in the environment and, consequently, a higher prevalence or intensity of parasites reaching the fish population. Now, the model acknowledges that fisheries are usually the most significant factor causing changes in overall fish numbers in the ecosystem. But the link between parasite abundance and seal abundance is considered probably inevitable, biologically speaking.
Does fishing make it worse?
Interestingly, fisheries might inadvertently exacerbate the parasite problem in some cases. If fishing boats discard fish guts, viscera overboard, and those guts contain live nematodes, the parasites can potentially survive and be ingested by other fish or even seabirds, helping to continue the parasite's life cycle in the ecosystem. However, it's not always a simple correlation. For example, in the German Wadden Sea, despite significant increases in both harbor and gray seal numbers over recent decades, a noticeable decrease in fish quality due to seal parasites has not actually been observed. So the real-world impact can vary and depends on many factors.
Are there ways to reduce these conflicts between seals, porpoises, and fishing?
Yes, significant effort is going into developing mitigation measures. In Denmark, for example, the technical university DTU Aqua has been actively working on developing alternative fishing gear. The goal is twofold. First, to reduce the accidental bycatch of harbor porpoises in gillnets, which has been a serious conservation issue. And second, to reduce the damage that seals inflict on fish caught in small-scale coastal gillnet and longline fisheries. Seals are smart and learn to take fish from nets, often damaging the gear and the catch.
What kind of alternative gear?
They're exploring things like specialized fish traps, called cod pots, basically like lobster pots, but designed for cod, which seals can't easily raid, and porpoises are unlikely to get caught in. They're doing trials in collaboration with Swedish researchers. They're also experimenting with other types of traps and modifying small-scale Danish seine nets to make them less prone to seal interactions and bycatch.
And you mentioned data sharing earlier. That's important here, too.
Absolutely critical. There's a recognized and pressing need for a central regional database to collate all the data on harbor seal and Atlantic gray seal numbers that are collected under various national monitoring programs across the North Atlantic, North Sea, Baltic, etc. The idea is to centralize this information across different IC estimate management areas. Why? Because these seals are highly mobile marine predators. They routinely transit across national borders. Having integrated, easily accessible regional data would allow scientists and managers to better track overall population trends, document range expansions or contractions, especially at the edges of their distribution, and understand large-scale movements. This is essential for developing effective, coordinated, science-based conservation and management strategies across their entire range, rather than just nation by nation.
Okay, final mega recap for this section on factors influencing marine communities and conservation.
Let's do it.
We started by looking at vibrant coastal ecosystems using Point Reyes, PRRE, and Golden Gate, GOGA, in California, as examples. We saw their high biodiversity, but also the pressures they face.
A real mosaic of habitats under pressure.
We discussed water quality stressors, point and non-point pollution from urban runoff, agriculture, ranches, dairies, failing septic systems leading to nutrient enrichment, eutrophication, algal blooms, and loss of vital habitats like eelgrass.
And the resulting impacts on biodiversity.
We touched on invasive species like Ammophila beachgrass, altering ecosystems, and the complex issue of erosion and sedimentation, sometimes too much, sometimes too little. Monitoring these using indicators like fecal indicator bacteria, E. coli, Enterococcus is key.
Managing complex interacting stressors.
Then we shifted to marine mammal ecology and fishery interactions, looking at harbor seal population dynamics, their recovery in places like the Wadden Sea, and the impacts of phocine distemper virus, PDV.
Long-term monitoring reveals resilience and challenges.
We discussed potential competition for resources with fisheries and the role of seals in transmitting nematode parasites like Pseudoterranova decipiens, sealworm, to fish stocks, and how fisheries practices might influence this.
Complex ecological and economic interactions.
Finally, we highlighted mitigation measures, like developing alternative fishing gear, cod pots, modified seines, to reduce bycatch of porpoises and seal depredation, and the critical need for better regional data collection and sharing for managing these mobile transboundary species.
Moving towards science-based solutions and cooperation.
Key terms: Poragoga, oligotrophic eutrophication, invasive species, Ammophila, fecal indicator bacteria, E. coli and Enterococcus, harbor seal PDV, nematode parasites, Pseudoterranova, bycatch mitigation. Phew! We've explored the diverse and often vulnerable coastal ecosystems and the really complex interactions between marine mammals and human activities like fishing. It truly highlights how interconnected everything is, doesn't it? From the deepest whale fall to our busy coastlines. Now, as we start to wrap up our deep dive today, let's try to connect all these different threads back to one of the biggest pictures of all. The planet's carbon cycle? How does even a sinking whale fit into that? 7. Contribution to the ocean's carbon cycle. We've really traversed a huge range today, haven't we? From the absolute microscale of bone-eating worms and their symbiotic bacteria, up to global scientific expeditions spanning centuries, and then zooming into the complex management issues on our local coastlines. It makes you wonder, how do all these incredibly diverse pieces, even something seemingly isolated, like a single whale sinking into the abyss, contribute to something as monumental, as global as the planet's carbon cycle?
Right, that's a crucial connection to make, and it brings us back to the fundamental role of the ocean in regulating our planet's climate. If we connect this to the truly bigger picture, the ocean plays an absolutely indispensable role in the global carbon cycle. It acts as a massive carbon sink.
Meaning it absorbs carbon dioxide.
Exactly. It absorbs a significant portion, perhaps around a quarter to a third of the carbon dioxide, CO2, that humans release into the atmosphere, primarily from burning fossil fuels. By doing so, it helps to slow the rate of climate change. It's a vital planetary service.
Okay, so how do whale falls fit into that big picture?
Well, whale falls, while they're certainly localized events, provide a really fascinating and quite dramatic example of how biological processes transport organic carbon directly from the surface ocean waters down to the deep seafloor. Remember, that whale grew by consuming vast amounts of krill or fish, incorporating carbon from the surface ecosystem into its massive body, its tissues, its organs, its bones. When it dies and sinks, it takes all that captured carbon with it, directly to the deep sea.
So it's like an express elevator for carbon.
In a way, yes. A very efficient, concentrated delivery. And then the decomposition processes that happen at the whale fall site, particularly that long-term anaerobic breakdown of the lipids within the bones and the subsequent chemosynthesis driven by sulfide oxidizing bacteria, these are active participants in localized carbon cycling on the seafloor. Crucially, much of the carbon contained in the whale carcass, especially the portion incorporated into the long-lasting biological communities or buried in the sediments, is effectively sequestered,
Sequestered meaning.
meaning it's locked away in the deep ocean, removed from active exchange with the atmosphere for potentially very long periods, hundreds, maybe even thousands of years.
So even though it's just one whale at a time, it's still part of this global carbon storage system.
Exactly. While the direct contribution of a single whale fall to global carbon sequestration might seem relatively small in isolation, the cumulative effect of countless whale falls occurring across all oceans over geological timescales, alongside all the other forms of detritus and sinking organic matter, like plankton, fickle pellets, the marine snow, all of this contributes significantly to the ocean's biological pump.
The biological pump, what's that?
The biological pump is the overall process by which the ocean's biological activity, primarily photosynthesis by phytoplankton at the surface, followed by sinking of organic matter, transports carbon from the surface ocean down into the deep ocean interior where it can be stored for long periods. Whales, both through their sinking carcasses and even through things like their nutrient-rich feces stimulating phytoplankton growth, play a role in making this pump work.
So studying whale falls helps us understand this bigger process.
Absolutely. Research specifically on the role of whales as detritus in marine ecosystems highlights their contribution not just to the deep-sea food web, but also to this crucial carbon transport mechanism, and more broadly, understanding the entire marine organic carbon cycle, including how much carbon is sinking, where it's going, how long it stays there, and how factors like the abundance and isotopic ratio, like the 13C-12C ratio of atmospheric CO2, influence it. This is all absolutely essential for understanding and predicting global climate change. This really underscores why sustained ocean observations, measuring things throughout the entire water column, not just at the surface, are so critical. We need to track changes not just in carbon, but also in ocean temperature, salinity, oxygen levels, and importantly, ocean circulation patterns, because all of these are intrinsically linked to climate change and the ocean's ability to keep taking up carbon.
And this links back to the international agreements.
It certainly does. It underscores the profound relevance of international legal instruments like UNCLOS, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, which provides the framework for governing ocean activities, and the importance of cooperative actions between nations to maintain a healthy, functioning ocean ecosystem.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, a healthy ocean, capable of regulating climate and cycling carbon effectively, is absolutely foundational for our global economy, our food security, and our overall social development and well-being. It's all connected.
8. Conclusions. The unfolding story of our ocean. So where does this leave us? What does this all mean, this incredible journey we've taken today? We've journeyed from the almost alien micro-world of bone-eating worms and the chemical marvels of deep-sea vents,
Right.
all the way back through the heroic historical quests of explorers like Captain Cook, forward to the technological marvels of modern research vessels and ROVs exploring the abyss live online. And then we even looked at the complex nitty-gritty challenges of managing our dynamic coastal environments and marine mammal populations. It's been quite a ride.
It really has. And I think this deep dive vividly illustrates, perhaps more than anything, the immense complexity and the profound interconnectedness of ocean ecosystems. It reveals how life thrives in these unique microbial worlds, even under the most extreme conditions imaginable, but it also shows how widely human activities, both historical and present day, can impact marine life and water quality, from our local coast right down to the global scale of ocean currents and carbon cycling.
And our understanding itself has evolved so much.
Oh, dramatically. Our scientific understanding has evolved incredibly over, say, roughly the last 100 to 150 years of dedicated ocean research. We can really see distinct phases in this evolution, from those initial, often single-point observations or soundings pioneered by expeditions like the famous HMS Challenger voyage back in 1872, to more systematic, regionally focused studies that became more common after World War I, then to those truly international cooperative efforts that emerged in the late 1950s, driven by things like the IGY and the IDOE, enabling basin-scale studies. And now, arguably, we're in what some might call a fourth phase. This phase is really characterized by global, highly interactive research programs, driven by sustained ocean observations using networks of advanced in-situ technologies, floats, moorings, gliders combined with powerful remote sensing from satellites in space. This comprehensive approach, trying to encompass physical, biological, and chemical interactions simultaneously, represents a much more integrated view of the ocean system.
It really feels like a truly unfolding story, doesn't it? A narrative that continues to surprise us with almost every new expedition, every new discovery.
Absolutely. And despite centuries of exploration, despite these groundbreaking technological advances we've discussed, the ocean, particularly the deep ocean, remains far from fully explored or mapped. That's not an exaggeration. There are still vast unknowns out there, entire regions, ecosystems, biological processes that we have only glimpsed or perhaps haven't even seen at all yet. The potential for discovery is still immense.
And what does that imply for how we should approach the ocean going forward?
Well, I think it highlights the urgent and ongoing need for an integrated, holistic approach to both ocean research and, crucially, ocean management. We need to look at the system as a whole. And alongside that, we need intensified international cooperation. These are absolutely essential if we're going to effectively address the pressing global challenges facing the ocean today, things like the relentless march of climate change causing warming and sea level rise, the linked issue of ocean acidification, the worrying expansion of low oxygen or dead zones, deoxygenation, and the pervasive pollution from land-based sources, including those excessive nutrients we talked about, but also chemical contaminants and the ubiquitous presence of plastics. The emerging concept of the ocean blue economy really reflects this critical shift in thinking. It's about moving towards economic management and use of marine resources in a way that explicitly aims to ensure the long-term sustainability of those resources and the health of the marine environment for future generations. It requires balancing use with protection.
It feels like this whole journey, from the deep sea to the coast, from historical voyages to modern tech, really underscores that understanding and protecting our oceans isn't a task for one person or one country or even one generation.
Exactly.
It's an ongoing collaborative journey. It's a legacy passed down through generations of explorers and scientists, building on each other's work. And it's a journey that deeply impacts our future, fundamentally linked, as you said, to our economy, our food security, our climate, and our very social development.
Indeed. It's a testament to human ingenuity and our persistent curiosity about the world around us. But it also carries a profound responsibility.
So maybe a final thought to leave our listeners with. What new mysteries do you think await discovery in the deep? And perhaps more importantly, how will humanity's approach to ocean stewardship need to continue to evolve to meet the immense challenges and opportunities of tomorrow's ocean?